Imagine this, it's 4:47 in the morning, the world outside your window is completely still, no cars, no voices, no notifications, just the soft hum of a city that doesn't know it's supposed to be awake yet. And there you are, eyes open, mind already moving, not because an alarm dragged you out of sleep, but because something inside you just decided it was time. Now, most people hear that and think, that sounds miserable. Or they assume you're some kind of productivity robot who schedules your emotions into 15-minute time blocks. Maybe they picture you drinking a green smoothie in the dark and journaling about your 5-year plan while the rest of humanity is deep in REM sleep. But here's the thing, that picture is almost always wrong. And the psychology behind why certain people naturally wake before the world does is far more interesting and far more human than any productivity myth will ever give it credit for. So let's talk about it. First, let's get something out of the way. Not everyone who wakes up early chooses to. Some people are jolted awake by anxiety, by unresolved stress that their brain decided 4 a.m. was the perfect time to process. That's a different conversation entirely. What we're talking about today is the person who wakes early with a particular quality of calm, a sense of ownership over the silence, a quiet eagerness that doesn't quite fit into the rest of their waking day. If that sounds like you, keep watching, because a lot of what you're about to hear might feel like someone finally put language to something you've felt your whole life. Your chronotype, which is just a fancy word for your biological clock's natural preference, is actually largely genetic. Research from the University of Exeter, analyzing data from over 450,000 people, found dozens of genetic variants associated with being a morning person. So if you've always been someone who greets the dawn voluntarily, there's a real chance you were quite literally built this way. Your circadian rhythm, that internal 24-hour clock that regulates sleep, hormone release, body temperature, is tuned slightly differently. Your cortisol, the hormone that helps you feel alert, peaks earlier. Your melatonin clears out sooner. Your body, in a very biological and unchosen sense, decided you belong to the morning. But the genetics are just the beginning. Because what's more fascinating is what early rising does to a person's psychology over time and what it reveals about who they already are. People who consistently wake before the world tend to share something that psychologists describe as a preference for proactive behavior. They don't just respond to life as it comes at them, they orient themselves toward it in advance. Think about what the early morning actually is, structurally. It is hours before the world makes any demands of you. No emails have arrived yet that require answers. No one is calling. No social obligation has knocked on your door. The early morning is, in psychological terms, a space you inhabit entirely on your own terms. And the person who is drawn to that space is almost always someone who finds deep psychological safety and autonomy. In choosing, in being the author of their own hours. There's something else happening too. Something quieter and harder to name. Early risers often describe the pre-dawn hours with language that sounds almost spiritual. It feels like the day belongs to me. I think more clearly. It's the only time I feel like myself. And psychology actually has a framework for this. The concept of psychological restoration, developed by environmental psychologists Rachel and Stephen Kaplan, suggests that the human mind genuinely needs periods of low stimulation and voluntary attention to recover. Morning quiet, especially before the digital world boots up, offers exactly that. Your attention isn't being pulled in 17 directions. You're not context switching. You're just present. And for certain minds, that stillness isn't emptiness. It's the richest part of the day. Now here's where it gets really interesting. Studies on self-determination theory, a major framework in modern psychology, suggest that when people engage in activities they have personally chosen, without external pressure, their sense of well-being and motivation goes through the roof. For an early riser, those first hours are often the only hours of the day that feel entirely self-directed. Everything that comes after, the commute, the meetings, the obligations, the responding to everyone else's needs, belongs to the world. But that window before sunrise, that belongs to them. And the brain, which is exquisitely sensitive to feelings of autonomy and control, responds to that with something close to joy. Let me paint you a picture. There's a particular kind of person who, as a child, used to wake up early on weekends. Not to watch cartoons, but just to sit in the house before their family woke up. To feel the texture of a quiet morning. To have thoughts without interruption. Nobody taught them to do that. It just felt necessary, like breathing. If that was you, what you were doing intuitively as a child was seeking regulatory space. You were, without knowing it, practicing a form of psychological self-maintenance. That kid who loved the empty Saturday morning grew into an adult who still does. There's also a personality dimension worth exploring. Research consistently links morningness, the technical term for a preference toward earlier hours, with traits like conscientiousness, emotional stability, and agreeableness. Now, that doesn't mean night owls lack these traits. Personality is wildly complex and never that simple. But it does suggest that people drawn to early mornings often have a particular relationship with structure, with forward thinking, and with emotional regulation. They tend to be planners, not because they're controlling, but because their brain finds comfort in knowing what comes next. The morning gives them that, a quiet moment to orient before the day's variables multiply. And here's something nobody talks about enough. Early risers often experience a profound sense of earned solitude. This is different from loneliness. Loneliness is the pain of being alone. Earned solitude is the pleasure of it. It's the feeling of having carved out time for yourself in a world that is constantly asking for pieces of you. People who wake early before the rest of their household, before their partner, their kids, their roommates, often describe this as the only time they feel genuinely alone with their own mind. And that privacy, that inner privacy, is not selfishness, it is survival. It is how they maintain the self that then sews us up for everyone else. Now, does waking early make you more successful? The internet certainly wants you to think so. And yes, research does show correlations between morningness and certain academic and professional outcomes. But correlation is not a personality endorsement. What matters far more than what hour you rise is whether your habits, whatever they are, align with your values and your deepest needs. For the person who genuinely loves the morning, those early hours aren't a productivity hack. They are an expression of something true about who they are. So if you're someone who wakes before the sun, before the noise, before the demands begin, here's what I want you to understand. You are not strange. You are not running from sleep or chasing some idealized version of discipline. You are, in all likelihood, someone who has found a quiet and consistent way to protect something essential inside yourself. You are someone who knows, on some level, that the day will ask a great deal of you, and so before it does, you meet yourself first. That is not a productivity strategy, that is wisdom. There's something quietly radical about claiming the dark hours as your own, about sitting in a world that hasn't started performing yet and just being in it. If that resonates with you, I'd genuinely love to know. Drop a comment and tell me what you do with your early mornings. What does that time mean to you? And if this video felt like it described someone you know, share it with them. Sometimes the best thing we can do for the people in our lives is hand them a mirror and say, look, there's a reason you are the way you are. And it's a good one.